All right. Very happy to have Dexter Taylor here to tell me about what in the heck is going on in New York State. Dexter, I am looking at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office release about you. I'm
Hmm.
curious if any media picked this up, by the way, because one of the things we're going to talk about today is how the news just kind of runs with press releases without asking a whole lot of questions.
Questions, yeah, yeah.
But before we get into that, let's talk about what happened. So their release, this is from April 22nd, 2022.
Yep.
Bushwick man indicted for illegal possession of ghost guns. Numerous weapons, both completed and unfinished, recovered from defendant's apartment, including 4 assault weapons, 5 handguns, and 4 rifles. What happened? Welcome, by the
Well,
way.
thank you. Thanks for having me. Well, putting aside the use of kind of political nonsense terms like ghost guns, there's nothing ghostly about them, and the correct pronunciation is traditional. I was making traditional guns in the traditional American way in an American home. So the backstory is, I'm a native New Yorker, squeaky clean criminal record, never a problem with the law, right? I'm a 30-year veteran of the software industry. I love making stuff. I've always loved making stuff. I was always a nerdy kid. I was always taking my toys apart and putting them back together, playing with Legos, plastic models. I had a subscription to Popular Science when I was a kid. I was one of those kids. Okay. And again, 30-year veteran of software, but I also have a machine shop in my basement. I sent you some pictures of the furniture I've made, my dining room table and my loft bed and so on and so forth. So a few years ago, in fact, by the way, now I'm sitting in the control room of my studio, Switching Yard Studios here in Brooklyn. So a few years ago, I got interested in gunsmithing. As a kid, I was always interested in tanks and fighter planes and weapons and so on and so forth, and war movies. I mean, typical red-blooded American kid. So a few years ago, I got interested in gunsmithing. And I saw that people were taking 80% receivers, so-called, and machining them to completion in their machine shops and or in their workshops or garages and adding parts and coming up with finished weapons. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like, I thought that was just the coolest, most just traditional American thing you could possibly do with your time. It should go without saying by now that I am a conservative, but I'm a politically homeless conservative. I'm a Frederick Douglass conservative. So anyway, I got interested in it and started doing it. I bought parts, legal parts
What
online.
year would this have been when you started getting into this?
I don't recall. It was obviously before 2022. I was probably making weapons for at least a year, maybe more, before
Were
they
you
proliferated. Mm.
Because I'm trying to think back to when this term ghost gun became popularized
Hmm.
and spread through the news
Hmm.
mostly, and I want to say that it was a I feel like it was a Biden administration era. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that the term was in use before that. I think the term
Relatively
was used
new in a
before Biden came.
popular yeah, I feel like it's relatively new as a popular term, or, that somebody would even know what they're talking about.
Well, yeah, you might say that. I mean, certainly, again, it's a non. It's important to point out that it's a nonsense word, right? Like logos matters. Okay, words matter. They mean things. There is nothing ghostly about a so-called ghost gun, about a traditional gun. It is simply a weapon with no serial number. And what a
Mm.
lot of people don't know, and what the state is anxious that people not understand, is that well, the state and statists, right? What they're anxious that people not understand is that not having a serial number does nothing, in no way materially impacts the ability of police to investigate gun crimes. Okay, if a crime is committed with an unserialized weapon, and the police can recover the projectile and they can recover the weapon, they can do ballistics. If they can't recover the weapon, then there's nothing against which to run a ballistics match anyway, and the serial number will do you no good. You understand what I'm saying? So the serial number
Mhm.
is an administrative detail. It is important to serialize receivers if you manufacture, excuse me, to serialize weapons. It's the serial number is usually on the receiver. It's important to serialize them if you manufacture them for the purpose of distributing or selling the weapons, I had no intention, and I distributed no weapons. I never spoke about them online. I never photographed them online. I never talked about weapons or gunsmithing online. I never made any hints that weapons or my gunsmithing services were for sale to anyone. At the time I was raided, and we'll get to the raid in a second, but at the time my house was raided, I was a member in good standing of my local gun range. I had passed their criminal background check. I had signed up for a service called Rocket FFL because I wanted to find out exactly what paperwork I would have to file to be good to go to start to pursue this thing commercially above board. So I wasn't trying to get into a pissing contest with the government, with any government. And I was really looking at this as my second career, as the beginning of my second career. So anyway, I got into gunsmithing, started making some weapons. I started with Glock style pistols on the 80% model, and then I went over to AR style rifles. I made seven AR-15s and one AR-10, and I just loved it. I was looking at YouTube channels and all these gun tubers and looking up to all these guys who had kind of built their business and built their livelihood from just being shade tree mechanics like me, right? Bill Geisley, for example, from Geisley Automatics, someone who I actually bought parts from, a company that I bought parts from, got his first contract building triggers for the U.S. Army's marksmanship team. Right. So I was like, yeah, I could do this. And, at the time I was conscious of getting kind of long in the tooth for a software developer. Again, I've been in software for 30 years this year. And most guys who have been as long as I have don't write code every day. But I was thinking, man, I could actually bring my expertise as a data guy, as a software developer to weapons science. So I started, thinking about products like Drift 360, an integrated dry fire training program, a desktop brass QA platform where you'd have an Arduino and like a cheap laser scanner or a cheap optical scanner, and for the hand loading community, you could actually scan your brass automatically and pick up defects that were maybe too small for middle-aged eyes to see, right? And cyclic energy flow, a theoretical framework for weapons tuning, for semi-automatic rifle tuning. I was all in, right? And I had all these plans. I was gonna buy some land in South New Hampshire.
One thing I guess I'm confused about. Let me just go back to this.
Sure.
In this release of theirs, they don't actually say what the law is that you allegedly they're arguing you violated. They just say they quote those who possess ghost guns evade critically important background checks and registration requirements, and because they have no serial number, they are untraceable. The surge in ghost guns in our neighborhoods is a major contributor to the violence plaguing our communities, and my office is working tirelessly to stop their proliferation in Brooklyn. But they don't say what's illegal about it. They just say that they don't like it.
Well, I mean, that's all. I mean, again, these people are on a kind of a might makes right kind of timeline, right? So yeah, it doesn't have to be illegal. They just have to not like it. Look, again, there is nothing about an unserialized weapon that prevents police officers from investigating, from properly investigating and successfully investigating gun crimes. That is a myth. Okay. I'll be charitable and call it a myth rather than a lie, but that's what that is. Again, these are traditional guns. These are guns made in the traditional American, that is in an America about them, right? And again, the whole thing of critical background checks and all this business. Look, if you buy a completed weapon, there is always a background check. This is what a lot of people don't understand. If you go and you buy a completed weapon online or anywhere else, there is always a background check, right? And it's a federal background check, all 50 states, yeah? But I made my own weapons. I bought legal parts online and machined the receivers to completion and added parts and came up with finished weapons. So the charges against me, again, as I said before, They raided my house in April of 2022. It was a SWAT team. It was a joint joint NYPD ATF task force. And they took me off to Rikers Island, where I spent a week. My bail, by the way. Oh, there you are again. My bail,
Yeah, I
by the
saw
way.
$50,000.
Well, I don't know where I don't know where they got that number. My bail was almost $250,000. My bail was set
Really?
at $200,000. So I don't know where that $50,000 came. My parents had to put their house up to get me out. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? Like they wouldn't. I mean, because if you go by the 10% thing, it's like if it was $50,000 to get out, they could have scraped together $5,000 and gotten me out. No, 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 no. My bail was almost $250,000, and I was in Rikers for a week. Yeah. So think about that the next time you hear liberals talk about bail reform. Yeah. In any case,
Did
I
you have
was
any
go on.
idea when okay, taking you back to the time when they busted through your door,
Yeah.
and did you have any idea what was going on? Like,
No,
was there
no,
anything
the first
that
thing
occurred in your mind that you had
the fir-
violated any laws or anything
the
like that?
first thing I said when the SWAT team came through my door was, "Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dexter Taylor. I live here. Who are you guys looking for?"
Wow.
Because I thought they had the wrong house. I was like, "Oh, it's the warrant squad. They're looking for some knucklehead who's da 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 posted up somewhere." Okay, right. It's like no, and obviously because look, it is one thing. I mean, I'm pretty close to being a Second Amendment absolutist, or maybe I am an absolutist. I think reasonable people can differ as to whether or not there should be such a thing as a prohibited person. I think it makes sense to a man on the street, for example, a man or woman on the street, that there should be such a thing as a prohibited person. For example, if you have a record of violent crime, right? If you're a convicted murderer or what have you, right? So, but none of those things apply here. Okay, my criminal record is squeaky clean. Okay, and again, I had passed a background check before I was raided. I was a member in good standing of my local gun range, the West Side Rifle and Pistol Range in Manhattan. Right? I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I've lived here my whole life except for 7 years where I lived in Baltimore. My family is here. All my people are here. So I'm not a flight risk, right? The police, by the way, after I was raided, they seized my cell phone, never returned it. They cloned my cell phone. They seized my computers. They subpoenaed my email records. So the state of New York has vast investigative powers. If they were afraid that some rando was making guns in his basement in Brooklyn, who is this guy? Is he a problem? Is he going to create a problem for us? Well, they could have done this investigation. It's not hard to get AT&T to give up my phone records, right? It's not hard to get Gmail or whoever to give up my email records, right? They could have done all this stuff. They chose not to. They chose to go for the maximalist option. Why? Because the timeline they're on is might makes right. Look, don't take my word for it. Kathy Hochul said it. She said it. After the Bruin decision came down, which re-clarified the status of our Second Amendment rights as indeed being first-class rights, just like our First Amendment rights. That is the rights we already have that adhere to us, which are protected by the Second Amendment and protected by the First Amendment. These are all first-class rights. They're not privileges. So in the same sense that I don't have to ask the state's permission to speak my mind, in the same sense I don't have to ask the state's permission to declare for Christ, in no wise do I have to ask the state's permission to manufacture traditional weapons in my home. And again, you could say, well, what about prohibited people? Okay, fair enough. Let's have that argument. But I'm not a prohibited person because I have a squeaky clean criminal record. And in fact, don't take my word for it. The prosecutor in our case, at least the previous one, they defenestrated him not that long ago for optical reasons. But the prosecutor in my case said in writing, in response to one of our filings, that Mr. Taylor should have applied for a permit because he would have passed the good moral character test. This is the prosecutor now in a case where the state of New York is trying to put me in prison for 18 years. Okay? The state of New York has offered a plea deal, 8 years instead of 18. I turned them down flat. No, thank you. because I haven't done anything wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, again, when I started this, to your earlier question, I want to be very clear about this. I'd never started this hobby wanting to get into a pissing contest with the state of New York. I never wanted to be a Second Amendment advocate. Excuse me, not an advocate. How you say, an activist, right? But now that this has happened, I'm not going to admit to having done something wrong, because I've done nothing wrong, and it's especially galling. It's especially galling to think about this case. Being a New Yorker, living in a city where I just saw a bunch of guys beat up on two cops on camera and walk. Yeah? I just not that long ago there was an adjunct professor at Hunter College who chased a cameraman down the street with a deadly weapon. Right? And she walked.
A professor.
Yeah, and wait a minute. And yeah, Professor Shalene Rodriguez. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I used to live by Hunter College.
Oh, there you go. I used to go by there all the time when I was, stomping around Manhattan. I remember there was a couple who, back in the quote unquote summer of love, who tossed a lit Molotov cocktail into a parked police unit. They got a year apiece, roughly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so here we are, right, in a state run by the Democratic Party. I should hasten to add that I am a politically homeless conservative. I'm a non-aligned conservative. So I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. Again, I'm a Frederick Douglass conservative. But it's worth noting, right, that the Democrats running this state are quick to tell us about white supremacy, about murderous white people who are out to get us. The Democrats running this city are quick to tell us that math is racist, that punctuality is racist, that bibliophilia is racist, or is it a hallmark of white supremacy, but not gun control. Somehow not so-called gun control. That doesn't fall under the rubric of systemic racism. That's interesting. Isn't that odd? So anyway, I know I'm ranting a bit, but long story short, no, I'm not going to plead down to a lesser felony, because I did nothing wrong. I've been a good neighbor. I'm a father. I'm a man of the community. Okay. I'm invested in my city. This is my home. Okay. And I've never done anything to interfere with or threaten public order and the safety of my neighbors. So no, I'm not going to plead to, if listen, I can't stop them. I cannot stop them. If they want to send me to prison for 18 years, so be it. But look us all in the eye and do it. Like, okay, show your cause for sending a law-abiding citizen who your guy said is a man of good character. Show me why you're going to send me to prison for 18 years for building something that the highest law in the land has said that I have the right, I have the right to keep and bear. And the highest law in the land says that right shall not be infringed. So, a rant over, sorry.
No, it's not a rant. It's all important information. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, wow, this really makes me want to have a drink because what's happening here, then you can go to AllisonWinePromo.com and support the show. Keep interviews like Dexter coming on. They never tell me who I can interview, what I can say, what I can ask. And it's very hard to find sponsors in this day and age who are like that. So if you're a wine drinker, go get some amazing wine from very remote regions of Argentina. Get it at a good price. You get 50% off and 50% off shipping. And you can support the show while having a great glass of wine. Maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, I unfriended somebody on Facebook over this issue, but now that I'm listening to Dexter Taylor talk about it, I realize I'm wrong. Get them a glass of wine or a whole bottle of wine and apologize, and I'm sure they will forget all about it. And not just because they're drunk, because the wine is just that good. AllisonWinePromo.com. Okay, I also want to let everybody know you can send me a letter. You can send me a picture of your family. You can send me your pocket lint. You can send me a winning lottery ticket, support for the show, whatever you want, at P.O. Box 3355, Denellen, Florida, 34432. Love the letters that I've already gotten from people, and it's a great way to support the show if you don't want to use a credit card. We have questions for Dexter over at AllisonMorrow.locals.com, or you can be on my editorial board for $5 a month. And it's a great way to ask questions if you hate my questions and everything you've ever wanted to know. Go one-on-one with the most censored people on the internet. It's your chance to run the show and be the host. All right, one more time. Dexter's manifesto here. futurerad.io, Future Radio on Twitter, and Carbon Mike YouTube. Where else should people go to follow you if they want to support you? How do they do that? Give us your final words.
My Gibson Go link is in my Twitter is in my Twitter profile. So, and of course, thanks to all my donors, and thanks for all the prayers. Keep the prayers coming, please. Look, I think the most important thing is exposure. I think that's the most important thing. Again, I appreciate all my donors. The donations are important because I owe my lawyer all the money. But exposure, exposure, exposure. People who do what you do, and thank you, by the way, for handing me a hot mic, and letting me talk about my story. This is the most important thing. The optics of this case are terrible for New York State, not for me, for them. But that presupposes that people are watching. So the number one thing people can do is spread the word in their local communities. That's one. Two, again, if you want to find out more about me, look, I mean, my social media life is an open book. My Instagram is Foundation Tech. You can go see some of the cool stuff I've done. I don't have any pictures of weapons online, but you can check out my workshop. You can check out my garden, what have you, my cooking, my baking. I do a lot of baking.
I'm having a hard time finding your Twitter.
My Twitter, Future Radio Cast, all one word.
Oh, Future Radio Cast. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yes.
I'm finding it right now.
There
all right,
you
do baking. What's your favorite? Here it is. What's your favorite thing to bake?
Well, I don't know. It just depends. But for example, every year since my daughter was born, I baked her birthday cakes. You can if you go to Instagram, Foundation Tech, that's my Instagram channel. And again, I don't maintain it that much, but you can see like my workshop and my kitchen and stuff. And earlier I sent you some pictures of the furniture I've made.
Yeah.
So, and again, I really recommend people go and check out the Infinite Jigsaw podcast with Danny Duran. And that's where you can hear me. In addition to my, YouTube channel, that's where you can hear me talk about what we believe as foundationists. What is this brand of conservatism? What is it all about? And judge for yourself whether or not I'm whether I'm a threat to society.
This is nice.
Yeah, thank you.
You built this.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Very nice.
Yes, ma'am. That's a teak butcher block top, mahogany legs, and the apron, which you cannot see, is walnut. Yes, ma'am. And then we finished
I'd order that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the legs. I built a jig so that I could machine out a flat on each of the legs, so I could attach those brackets and make the legs demountable. So you could, because it's a very heavy table.
Gorgeous. Do you sell these?
Oh no! I just make them for myself. When my daughter starts her family, it'll be her dining room table. Yeah.
How old is she?
She's 16.
What does she think about all this?
She's proud of me for fighting. She told me so. She said, and by the way, the other thing I did when I got home from Rikers, the other thing I did was I went and we had a walk, and I told her everything. I told her exactly what I was up against. Told her what kind of time I was looking at too. So she knows everything. And the other day, we were talking on the phone, and she said, "Papa, I'm proud of you for fighting them." And so
that's got to make your heart have all the feels.
Hey, listen, you know what it is? It's a tonic. It strengthens me. I'm like, yep, good. Let's go. Yeah.
All right. Well, this will not be the last time we talk. I'd love to have you on a bunch more. I really appreciate your taking the time today. Dexter Taylor, everybody. Go check him out online. Thanks for watching. Thanks if you're on the editorial board for keeping interviews like this coming, and we'll see you guys next time.